Germany just declared war on Microsoft Teams. Not a cyber war, not a price dispute, but a complete digital divorce. We're talking about an entire German state ripping out Microsoft from 30,000 government computers, telling teams to get lost and switching to open source alternatives. Denmark followed. France joined in. Cities across Europe are now executing their own Microsoft breakups. What started as a quiet migration in one northern German state has exploded into Europe's loudest declaration yet. American big tech, you no longer control our digital future. Schleswig-Holstein's digitalization minister, Dirk Schroeder, declared they're ending use of Teams and turning to open source software to take back control over data storage and ensure digital sovereignty. This transition affects 30,000 public servants in its first phase, with another 30,000 teachers following in the coming years. But here's the part that should terrify Microsoft. This is just the beginning. By September 2025, civil servants, police officers, and judges in Schleswig-Holstein will stop using Microsoft's programs. That means no more Teams for video calls, no more Word or Excel, no more Outlook for emails. Even the operating system, Windows itself, gets replaced by Linux. Word and Excel software are being replaced by LibreOffice, while OpenExchange is taking the place of Outlook for emails and calendars. This isn't a partial migration or a cost-cutting measure. It's a total extraction. What makes this so significant is the scale and commitment. The state aims to regain control over data storage and software infrastructure while reducing reliance on American tech giants. When a government makes this move, it sends shockwaves through the entire tech industry. And the timing? Deliberate. The shift comes amid growing EU concern over digital dependencies, especially since Donald Trump's return to the US presidency and heightened US-EU tech tensions. Europe watched Trump's first term create chaos with trade wars and unpredictable policy. His return amplified European fears. What happens when your entire digital infrastructure depends on a country that could turn hostile overnight? For years, digital sovereignty sounded like something politicians said at conferences. But recent events transformed it into urgent policy. The war in Ukraine revealed energy dependencies, and now Europe is confronting its digital ones. As one German official put it, just as Europe scrambled to replace Russian gas, governments are now scrambling to replace American software. The U.S. Cloud Act sits at the heart of this crisis. This law enables U.S. authorities to demand data from American companies regardless of where that data is stored, even on European servers, potentially bypassing international legal procedures. For European governments processing sensitive citizen data, court records, police investigations, and classified information, this represents an unacceptable security risk. Microsoft's own lawyer confirmed under oath in the French Senate in June 2025, admitting he cannot guarantee that French data stored in European Microsoft data centers is safe from silent U.S. government access. When even Microsoft's legal team can't guarantee data security, what choice do European governments have? Germany didn't act alone. Between June and November 2025, Denmark's Ministry of Digital Affairs is rolling out a transition from Microsoft to open source platforms, with half the staff migrating by August and full implementation by autumn. Danish Digital Minister Caroline Stage Olsen said they must never make themselves so dependent on so few that they can no longer act freely, noting that too much public digital infrastructure is currently tied up with very few foreign suppliers, making them vulnerable. Copenhagen and Aarhus, Denmark's two largest cities, have announced similar plans. France isn't sitting idle either. 11 French ministries installed LibreOffice on 500,000 workstations. That's 500,000 government computers that no longer depend on Microsoft Office. Italy's Ministry of Defense has standardized on LibreOffice for 150,000 PCs. Austria completed a 4-year migration away from Microsoft Office across its entire armed forces. Even Lyon, France's third largest city, has begun gradually replacing Windows with Linux and Microsoft Office with only Office across municipal workstations, with training for approximately 10,000 civil servants that began in June 2025. This isn't isolated pushback. This is coordinated strategic withdrawal. While governments execute their exits, European regulators are squeezing Microsoft from another angle. The European Commission formally opened its antitrust investigation into Microsoft's conduct in July 2023, following a complaint from Slack Technologies in 2020. The accusation? Since at least April 2019, Microsoft abused its dominant position in the market for SaaS productivity applications by tying Teams with its market-leading productivity applications, giving Teams a distribution advantage reinforced by interoperability limitations. Think about what that means. You buy Microsoft 365 for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, tools millions of businesses depend on. Microsoft throws in Teams for free, pre-installed, pre-integrated. Competitors like Slack and Zoom have to fight for every customer, while Microsoft gets automatic distribution to every Office user worldwide. On September 12, 2025, the European Commission accepted commitments from Microsoft to address preliminary concerns about the tying of Teams to Microsoft's productivity applications. Microsoft avoided a potentially massive fine by agreeing to unbundle Teams, offer Microsoft 365 without Teams at 50% lower prices, and improve interoperability with competing platforms. But the damage was done. The investigation confirmed what many suspected. Microsoft's business model depends on locking customers into its ecosystem, making switching painful and expensive. Let's talk money. Microsoft raised Dynamics 365 prices by 10% in 2024. Azure costs went up, and Windows 10's end of support in late 2025 would have forced expensive hardware upgrades across government fleets unless organizations paid Microsoft for extended security updates. This is the vendor lock and playbook perfected. First, make your software indispensable. Second, gradually increase prices because switching costs are prohibitive. Third, force hardware upgrades through artificial obsolescence. Experts say moving away from proprietary licenses can significantly cut costs, as Microsoft's enterprise contracts often include unpredictable fees and mandatory upgrades. Schleswig-Holstein expects to save tens of millions of euros by switching to Linux, LibreOffice, and OpenExchange, on the basis that one government agency workstation costs 2,000 euros per user per annum. Around 1/5, 400 euros, of that goes straight to Microsoft, which for a fleet of 15,000 workstations is about 6 million euros per year. Multiply that across every European government, municipality, and public institution, and you're looking at billions of euros flowing annually to Redmond, Washington. The Interoperable Europe Act, which took effect in 2024, now requires public sector bodies to consider open source alternatives first, ensuring interoperability within and across borders. This isn't guidance, it's a legal obligation. This regulatory framework transforms Europe's Microsoft exodus from optional to mandatory. Governments must now justify why they're not using open source alternatives. The burden of proof shifted. The UK's Competition and Markets Authority found that Microsoft's cloud licensing terms make it more expensive to run Microsoft software on competing platforms like AWS or Google Cloud, effectively steering customers toward Azure. The European Commission opened formal investigations into these practices, with AWS and Google filing complaints alleging anti-competitive behavior. Microsoft isn't just facing angry customers. It's facing coordinated regulatory assault across multiple jurisdictions, all asking the same question. Is Microsoft abusing its dominant position? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Europe tried this before and failed. Munich famously switched from Microsoft to Linux in the mid-2000s, then reversed course years later after escalating costs and complexity. Critics point to this as proof that Microsoft alternatives don't work at scale. But 2025 is different. The Interoperable Europe Act, enforced in 2024, encourages governments to prioritize open source technologies. LibreOffice has matured significantly. Cloud infrastructure makes deployment easier. And most importantly, the political will exists in ways it didn't before. The replacements are surprisingly capable. LibreOffice handles documents, spreadsheets, and presentations with strong Microsoft Office compatibility. OpenExchange provides email and calendar services. Nextcloud offers file sharing and collaboration. And Linux distributions designed for government use provide stable, secure operating systems without forced updates or telemetry collection. Will there be growing pains? Absolutely. Retraining tens of thousands of employees takes time and money. Interoperability issues will emerge. Some specialized software may not work on Linux. But governments are deciding that these short-term costs are worth long-term independence. As one consultant noted, when hit with surprise costs for updates, organizations feel cornered. That feeling, being trapped, unable to negotiate, forced to accept whatever terms Microsoft dictates, drove this rebellion. Microsoft isn't panicking publicly, but the revenue implications are serious. Government contracts represent stable, long-term income with high profit margins. Losing Germany, Denmark, France, and potentially dozens of other European public institutions means billions in lost future revenue. More concerning for Microsoft, this trend could spread beyond the government. If public institutions successfully transition to open source alternatives, private companies will watch closely. Why pay Microsoft thousands per employee when governments are proving viable alternatives exist? The reputational damage compounds the financial loss. When major European governments publicly declare they can't trust American tech companies with sensitive data, that message resonates globally. Other regions watching EU-US tensions, Canada, Australia, Latin America, Asia, might start asking similar questions about digital independence. Microsoft's response has been predictable: emphasize security investments, promise better pricing, and offer concessions to regulators. But the underlying problem remains. As long as Microsoft operates under US jurisdiction and the Cloud Act exists, European governments can't guarantee data sovereignty while using Microsoft services. This isn't just about software preferences or cost savings. We're witnessing the early stages of digital balkanization, a world where technology infrastructure splits along geopolitical lines. Europe is building its own digital ecosystem, independent of American tech giants and Chinese alternatives. The EU wants its own cloud providers, its own software platforms, its own standards. Not because European technology is necessarily better, but because digital sovereignty demands it. German MEP Alexandra Geese warned at the Nextcloud Summit in Munich that Europe risked being blackmailed by both American and Chinese tech giants. In a world of increasing geopolitical tension, controlling your own technology infrastructure isn't optional, it's survival. Microsoft's dominance seemed unshakable for decades. Windows and Office became synonymous with computing itself. But monopolies don't last forever, especially when they're built on foundations that no longer hold. Europe is proving that viable alternatives exist. Governments can function without Microsoft. The transition is messy and expensive, but it's happening. Each successful migration encourages others to follow. The question isn't whether more European institutions will leave Microsoft, it's how fast the exodus accelerates. Every price increase, every antitrust investigation, every data sovereignty scare adds momentum to this movement. Microsoft still has time to adapt, to offer genuine solutions to European concerns, to prove it can operate as a trusted partner rather than an unavoidable monopoly. But that window is closing. Germany didn't just ban Teams. Germany showed the world that breaking up with big tech is possible. And once that door opens, you can't force it closed again. The European exodus from Windows has begun, and it's only accelerating.